Hello, everyone. Welcome to this second version of the DecarBOOST workshop. For those that were not able to join yesterday, we host also a first workshop on opportunities for decarbonization in the Latin American region. I am Rocío Garcia, and I am the technical lead of the DecarBOOST project. This project is financed by the IKI initiative from Germany, and it's focused on Peru. Sorry, I started with Peru because I am Peruvian. Peru, Argentina, and Brazil. We have representatives from both countries now. We are waiting for Luciano, which is close to arrive. But before starting, I wanted to present the project through a video.
The climate crisis affects everyone and is posing an enormous challenge on countries around the world. We have to act together as a society to address these challenges. This will require continued action for decades to come, both to reduce emissions and adapt to the effects of climate change. A crucial element to move forward and decarbonize society is finance. The Paris Agreement calls for global financial flows to be consistent with an effective transition towards a low-carbon and resilient society. Within the DecarBOOST project, we aim to contribute to this goal by creating the enabling conditions to finance this transition in Latin American countries. Or perhaps in easier words, to finance climate action and ambition, with a special focus on the countries Argentina, Brazil, and Peru. The project does this by improving the political framework for investment in climate action, for instance by developing or enhancing financial instruments and mechanisms, by building up investment portfolios, and by developing sector investment plans. Crucial in this respect are peer learning and knowledge exchange between key stakeholders, engagement between public decision makers, investors, private sector, and civil society are critical to overcome the barriers to investment and come up with effective solutions. So the core engagement strategy of the project is therefore the continuous organization of multi-stakeholder dialogues, the establishment of a community of practice in climate and investment, which provides a regional space for Latin America, a collaborative network, if you like, where we will learn from each other, inspire each other, and develop new ideas and concrete solutions to move the transition forward.
So in order to fulfill the objective of the project, we have developed three different sets of outcomes. The first one is a barrier analysis, in which the three countries are identifying which are the main barriers that they are facing to move finance into more sustainable pathways. The second document is an analysis of financial instruments and regulatory changes that are supposed to be made to address some of these barriers. Finally, the third document incorporates information from the previous two outcomes and turns them into a sectoral investment plan that, besides the previous analysis, includes investment opportunities for the private sector as well as for the public sector. Besides these three technical documents, we are preparing other knowledge documents. Among them, we can find the international input dossier for negotiators, where each country is providing input to international negotiations on climate change. In addition, we are also preparing the annual investment report, which includes the status of each country in some particular economic sectors for them to invest in the countries.
What a great video. So thank you everyone for paying attention. So now this session will focus on what I mentioned is the third pillar of the project. So we will present some investment opportunities for the region. Before that, there are a couple of announcements. So we have, as you will see in the lower part of your screen, you will have a chat option and a Q&A option. So for the chat, we would love to see you introducing yourselves, to listen to from where you are from or why are you here. So it can be very interactive, but we can also we would also strongly ask you to keep your questions for the Q&A chat, so we can have that information in a more orderly manner. That will help us a lot to filter the questions and pass them to the panelists. Maybe we can see the program now. So for the first part, I would like to introduce Luciano. Luciano is from Argentina and he works for the DecarBOOST project. He's a consultant specializing in energy-related issues, a researcher focusing on energy, climate change, and knowledge management, and the Fundación Torcuato Di Tella. He was Undersecretary of Energy Planning at the Ministry of Finance of Argentina, and he was in charge of updating the National Energy and Climate Change Plan. Between 2016 and 18, he was National Director of Energy Information at the Ministry of Energy and Mining in Argentina. And in 2018, he was co-responsible for the development on issues related to energy data transparency and market digitalization in the framework of the G20 Energy Transition Working Group. So he has a lot of work in energy and the transport sector, and he is now leading one of the components that is being developed by Argentina as part of the DecarBOOST project. So please, Luciano, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Rocio. Thanks to everyone. Just a second, please. I will share my screen. Can you see it?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. Thank you all for joining us during this webinar. It's a pleasure to be here with you to discuss some of the opportunities in the energy and transport sectors which came out from the prioritization and the analysis we made regarding decarbonizing Latin America, in particular for Argentina. Yesterday, my colleague Micaela Carlino, during this the previous webinar, has described some of the processes which led us to identify these investment opportunities. I will go briefly through them, mostly through the key pillars or vectors for decarbonizing Argentina's energy and transport sectors. Then we will briefly review where we are standing today regarding these factors, which are the challenges that we have identified that are to be faced mostly by Argentina, but also by other countries of interest for this project, for decarbonizing the energy and transport sectors and to applying these vectors and these pillars. And finally, we chose to call these Aikido investment opportunities. We'll take these challenges for energy policy and for the decarbonization of our sectors, and from the base of those challenges, we will identify some investment opportunities which could be of interest for you and for the rest of the investment community in the short to medium and long terms. Going back to the key pillars we have identified for decarbonizing the transport and energy sectors in Argentina, we can summarize this in 4. The first one is to electrify, to substitute with electricity the majority of final energy consumption, and particularly that related to transport on mainly light vehicles, which are good candidates for electrification. In our scenarios, we have identified that in order to accomplish the decarbonization targets for Argentina, and particularly for pathway compatible with net zero emissions by 2050, we should go from 21% of the current share of electricity over the total final energy consumption to above 70%. We need to electrify. But if we electrify and we don't decarbonize, meaning we don't produce this electricity through emission-free power generation sources, we won't achieve the targets we are looking for. So our goal is also to reach a power generation of more than 90% of greenhouse gas emissions free power generation, meaning hydro, nuclear, variable renewables such as wind and solar power. And due to some of the constraints that we have identified and that I will show you later, one of the tools to go deeper in the decarbonization of the power sector is related to decentralization, to distributed energy. Apart from electrifying and decarbonizing, we need to reduce our energy intensity. This means to be more efficient, applying energy efficiency measures and modal shifts, both for end-use sectors other than transport, and particularly for transport, is also a key to achieving net zero emissions by 2050. But even reducing, this means efficiency and efficiency, even decarbonizing the power generation sector, and even electrifying as much as we can, we still find huge challenges for several final consumption sectors and uses. For example, for direct heat applications, for example, for long-haul freight transport and others. So whatever we can't electrify, we need to substitute with non-fossil fuels or perhaps other energy sources and vectors that could be used to satisfy those energy services and needs. And by this, we mean by replacing fossil fuels with liquid and gaseous biofuels, by replacing heat sources by solar thermal. This means direct thermal. This is not concentrated solar power generation. And also by other means such as low carbon hydrogen and power to X. Power to X in this context refers to synthetic fuels coming from green hydrogen and sustainable carbon sources. Quickly, where are we standing here? Okay, Argentina has increased their share of electricity over its total final energy consumption during the last decade. This is from 1960 to 2020. We are sitting around 22 to 23% of electricity over the total final energy consumption, and the growth has been steady. However, when we compare Argentina to the rest of Latin America, to OECD countries, and to the world, we find that we are sitting a little bit above these averages and even above Latin America and the Caribbean, but we are not generating that power by renewable sources. See, we are sitting below 30% when it comes to renewables over power generation, while other countries, due to their resources, their infrastructure, and also due to their policy choices, have increased their share of renewables over power generation. However, during the last 6 years, Argentina has notably increased the share of renewable energy sources other than large hydro over power generation. The light green line shows the monthly relationship between renewables in power generation over electricity demand. The green line shows the moving average for 12 months, and these green bars down here show the capacity which was added year by year of these variable renewable power generation sources. What we see, although, is that during the last years, we are, or the last months, we are currently entering into a plateau which means that the penetration of renewables into the power system has deaccelerated or even halted. When it comes to reduce, going back to efficiency, we find that the relationship between, or the energy intensity, or the relationship between the total internal energy supply of Argentina and her GDP has remained nearly constant during the last years, and has remained nearly constant also in a context by which Argentina isn't growing during the last years. And the lack of growth constitutes one of the most relevant challenges for increasing the power generation from renewable sources in the short to medium terms. However, we have decreased since the peak in 1991 and in 2022, which were pretty similar, but we have since then entered the plateau I just mentioned. When it comes to costs, to system costs, these system costs are perhaps known by most of you. We find similar evolutions during the last months for several countries. Argentina's system costs have risen notably during the last months, mostly due to imported fossil fuels, which are costly and increase the system cost in a context where thermal power generation represents more than 60% of Argentina's power generation mix. But, however, due to fiscal and policy decisions, the retail users are paying only for 30% of the system costs. And this 30% of the difference between this 30% of system costs and the 100% of the system cost is compensated by subsidies by the national government, while industrial costs are rising and are paid in full by large users. The penetration by fuel during the last years shows us that electricity, which is shown in yellow, has steadily increased, as I showed you, reaching a plateau during the last years. This is total final consumption, with differences among sectors. Households are being saturated by electricity and gases. This is LPG and natural gas. Commercial is mostly electrified, but also relies on natural gas. Industry also has a mix of natural gas and electricity, but transport and agriculture are heavily used to using fossil fuels. These are liquids, and this is natural gas for satisfying their energy needs.
Sorry, Luciano, we have a couple more minutes. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay. Thank you, Rocio. I'm sorry. We have found some challenges for achieving these vectors, or for applying these vectors in the short terms. In the short term, for electrifying, we found existing stocks of end-use equipment, including cards and carbon lock-in in several aspects. In the medium term, electrification faces severe transmission capacity constraints and competition with public-funded natural gas infrastructure. In the long term, conflicting visions on natural gas versus renewables development. Regarding decarbonization, we found, as mentioned yesterday by Micaela, lack of financing for the development of renewables and system stability issues under high penetration of renewables for the long term. Regarding reduction, a policy challenge, as I mentioned earlier, are increasing system costs and high fiscal subsidies, but also existing stocks of inefficient energy end-use equipment and carbon-intensive energy used for manufacturing and logistics, as I showed you earlier. And regarding substitution, Argentina faces challenges for the last mile of natural gas transport and distribution development, lack of refining capacity for the oil downstream sector, anything about 5.5 million barrels per day will be imported, and an overwhelming share of liquid fossil fuels over transport. These challenges, as I mentioned in our earlier Aikido, also represent opportunities. We have a nascent demand for electric vehicles, which means that there are business opportunities for first movers regarding households and public charging sections. We have this lack of transmission capacity means that we will need additional 21 gigawatts and $14 billion before 2030 on transmission capacity, and about 20 gigawatts and $35 billion for power generation. We have an important space here in the long term to replace natural gas appliances by substituting what currently is being used by the LPG mostly, but also natural gas, ancillary services, and long-term private renewables for electricity, including distributed energy in provinces, which has grown 151% year-over-year during the last month, and also opportunities for aggregation of energy efficiency opportunities, modal shifts, solar thermal for households, mostly low-income households, and also biofuels for incremental liquid fuel demand, as I mentioned earlier, which is over the refining capacity, and for the long-term hydrogen and power-to-X production for substituting what we couldn't electrify. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Rocio, I took a couple more minutes than I should.
That was fantastic, Luciano. Thank you very much. I already answered some of the questions one of the questions that was posed, and I have also shared in the chat the webpage from the DecarBOOST project, as well as from Decarbonizar, where most of this information can be found. So now with this, so thank you, Luciano. Then I think that the best way to proceed will be to wait until the end of these three presentations, and we can share the questions with the panelists. So with this, maybe we can share again the program. And we will pass to the second presentation. It will be given by Carolina Dubo. I probably she will correct the way I pronounce it, from COPE. Carolina is Brazilian and is a social scientist with a master's degree and a PhD in energy and environmental planning from COPE and the University of Rio de Janeiro. She's a senior researcher at the Center for Integrated Studies on the Environment and Climate Change, Centro Clima, and she develops studies on emissions mitigation and adaptation. She was a postdoctoral researcher at the Centre International de Recherche, well, in France. Sorry, I cannot pronounce that. My French is pretty much not good. And she coordinated now part of the reports that are being produced under the DecarBOOST umbrella. So she will now present one of the investment opportunities that, as part of the project, we have identified in the AFOLU sector. So please, Carolina, go ahead. You have 15 minutes.
Oh, hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very pleased and happy to share our studies with you. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So yesterday, my colleague William Wells, he presented our studies about the carbon pricing schemes in Brazil. And tomorrow, another colleague of mine, Otto Ribeira, will present the mitigation measures for the industry sector. So, and I will talk about investment opportunities in Brazil in the key AFOLU sector. My institution is Centro Clima, and Centro Clima, just a moment, please. Centro Clima stands for Integrated Center on Climate Change and the Environment, and it's linked to the Institute of Graduate Studies and Research in Engineering, copy of the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. It was founded in 2000 through an agreement between COPI and the Brazilian Ministry of the Environment. It has been actively participating in the development of public policies and strengthening the capacity of national and international stakeholders on climate change mitigation and adaptation at the national, state, and city levels. Among other studies, Centro Clima has been conducting several studies and projects developing long-term macroeconomic scenarios for Brazil involving stakeholders' participation. In regards to our country context, the Brazilian focus on climate change issues started in 2007, when the government created a committee to draw up a national climate change plan. Brazil made its first commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in 2009, presenting NAMA's pledges to the UNFCCC. In September 2015, Brazil submitted its intended national determined contribution. In March this year, the country presented the final version of the first NDC, aiming to reduce emissions by 37% in 2025 and 50% in 2030 compared to 25 emissions level, and indicating the long-term objective of achieving climate neutrality in 2050. For NDC implementation, a key priority is to increase the flow of financial resources to low carbon investments, creating mechanisms, instruments, policies, and measures to overcome various barriers. Centro Clima studies incorporate a solid modeling component to assess the economic and social implications of different sets of GHG mitigation measures. And we use an integrated modeling approach where a set of 6 sectoral models is linked to a general equilibrium macroeconomic model. It's from CIHED originally. It's now a Brazilian, is tropicalized to the Brazilian economy. The sector models consist of 4 energy demand models comprising transport, industry, buildings, and agriculture energy demand, energy supply in agriculture, forest, and other land use model. Estimates of greenhouse gas emissions from waste is also included in our model. Based on our model estimates of the mitigation potential of each NAMA and the validation of barrier and instruments obtained from various stakeholders, we identify the 2 most attractive investment opportunities for each sector. And for the AFOLU sector, I will present in minutes. As its mitigation option in the entire portfolio is not based on significant technological breakthrough or disruptive technology, and is limited to $25 per ton of CO2, 45 and 65 in each decade up to 2050, the mitigation actions selected for detail are those considered to be the most likely to be implemented from the point of view of barriers and policies needed to overcome them. Regarding the stakeholders' engagement, the methodology for building decarbonization scenarios applied by Centro Clima in the last decade has privileged a stakeholder-driven approach, which includes the following steps: to present, discuss, get feedback, and validate assumptions and results to the initial storylines and scenarios we have drafted. 4, 2 scenarios, a current policy scenario and a deep decarbonization scenario. We use these scenarios to identify the most likely mitigation measures that should be detailed. To identify the key barriers to materializing the DDS and the policy instruments to overcome them. And these scenarios were built within the scope of the DDP-BICS project. We participated in 15 stakeholder engagement events. They included 96 stakeholders from government, 89 from the business sector, 49 from the scientific community, in 55 from NGOs. Brazil is a forest country with nearly 500 million hectares of natural and planted forest. It is about 60% of its territory. And 50% of these hectares of forests are protected areas. Okay? The agricultural area is about 230 million hectares, and pasture lands cover approximately 75%, and crops about 25%. Curbing deforestation and promoting large-scale forest restoration are Brazil's main mitigation measure, and it's essential for the country to fulfill NDC commitments and achieve climate neutrality in 2050. Most deforestation is associated with impunity for environmental crimes, legal grabbing of public land, and low traceability of agricultural supply chain. So greater law enforcement is one of the most important measures to curb deforestation, as well as a huge program of payment for environmental services. On the other hand, non-designated areas, permanent protection areas, and rural areas that are deforested or lack vegetation coverage represent an opportunity for the expansion of reforestation and forest restoration in Brazil. Programs to support sustainable forest uses that include different forest restoration models and promote short-term financial benefits, such as bioeconomy and crops, livestock forestry systems, are key to boosting the country's large reforestation and forest restoration. Here, I present the AFOLU net emissions over time. The graph shows the evolution of AFOLU, highlighting the role of deforestation and removals. Okay, deforestations are these bars, blue bars, and removals are the green bars. Deforestation peaked in 2004 and then decreased until 2012. Since then, it started to grow again. Removals include protected areas, natural regeneration, reforestation, afforestation, and recovery of degraded pastures. The other bars are crops and livestock. Okay? And this is the total AFOLU. We can see here, when we compare the total subsectors with the country's emission, that the other emissions than AFOLU, the purple slice of the pie, is very small, okay? So AFOLU reached 82%, okay, in 2005, 58% in 2010, 57% in 2050, and 65% in 2020. The importance of AFOLU decreased in the middle of the period, but it's growing again, maybe mainly due to land use change. Okay, so we need to focus on land use change if we want to meet our commitments to the Paris Agreement. So having this in mind, we selected two investment opportunities. The first one is the restoration of native forests in the Amazon and Atlantic forest biomes. And this plan can harvest 4 billion tons of CO2 equivalent in 30 years by restoring 27 million hectares of native forest. Restoration in public areas will add 14 million hectares and to farms 12 million hectares by 2050. The instruments to propose reforestation and are the forest concession process for public areas and the forest code enforcement for farms. The total investment is $120 billion, okay, divided into OPEX and CAPEX. and it give us an average cost in terms of dollar per tons of CO2 that is about $24 for restoration in public areas in the first decade, $28 in the second decade, and $30 in the third decade. When it comes to restoration in private areas, these values are 7, 8, and 8. Okay. And where do the revenues come from? They come from carbon credits and payment for environmental service programs, but these revenues are not estimated in this particular investment opportunity. The following resources are national and multilateral development banks and organisms like the Amazon Fund, Green Climate Fund, Global Environmental Facility, and business models are public-private partnership and business to business. When it comes to carbon, the carbon market that can arise from these investment opportunities, we can have a lot of business to business going on.
Carolina, we have 2 more minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And thank you. The second investment opportunity is the reforestation with commercial species to supply biomass for wood pellets, briquettes, and chips. It can harvest 9.3 million tons of CO2 equivalent in 30 years by establishing forest plantations with commercial species to supply biomass for wood pellets, briquettes, etc., in an area of 5.8 million hectares by 2050. And this will take place in the south, southeast, and northeast regions. The benefits are the generation of carbon stocks, provision of sustainable biomass to replace non-renewable biomass and fossil fuels, and job creation. The available lands are characterized as pasture fields, and these areas will likely keep the same use in the absence of this project activity. The enabled conditions are facilitating the export of wood pellets and tax incentives to companies, increase the demand for biomass by power plants. The total investment would reach $52 billion with this share of OPEX and CAPEX. The average cost in terms of dollar per ton of CO2 would be $16 in the first decade, 40 in the second, and 61 in the third. Revenues come from the wood products and that were estimated in our OPEX, and carbon credits that were not estimated. We cannot do that considering that it would fluctuate a lot in the near future. Funding sources: the National Forest Development Fund, the Greenhouse Gas Emission Reduction Program, that is a Brazilian low carbon agriculture plan, and the National Support Program for Medium Rural Producers, another Brazilian program. And business models would be the same as the previous investment opportunity. Just adding that the first harvest will take place after 7 years, followed by successive cropping periods of 7 years. The project is expected to last 30 years, okay? And the conclusion, my final remarks, is that Brazil has numerous low-cost investment opportunities, mainly in AFOLU, contributing to net zero by 2050. There are already many policies in place that can contribute strongly to facilitating such investments. However, some of them need improvements, which are already identified in great part. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carolina. Thank you. That was very interesting. And then we have a little bit of a broader view of the energy sector in Argentina and now the AFOLU sector in Brazil, that are definitely some of the most important sectors in for the region and for each country. So thank you also for keeping the time. So we are not completely in a rush at the very end of this session. So with this, we can switch to Natalie Rona. Natalie Rona she's Peruvian. She's an economist specializing in public policy. She has been working in Libellula for years, and she is now the specialist there on climate finance for the organization, and in particular for the DecarBOOST project. So now maybe we can switch to her, and she will work on the role of private sector in the green economy reactivation in the region, with particular focus in Peru. And she will also present some of the investment opportunities that the project has identified for the country. So please, Natalie, go ahead. Keep in mind that you have 15 minutes to go.
Thank you,
now.
Thank you, Rocio. Good morning to everyone. I'm going to share my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, perfect. So today I'm going to present some of the work we have done with the DecarBOOST team in Peru. Some of the investment opportunities that we have found, and especially on some investment opportunity that is co-working spaces. So just the agenda of what I'm going to present today, I'm going to make a quick review on the context about how did we found these investment opportunities, what are these investment opportunities, and of course co-working spaces. So first, the approach that we gave to the project here in Peru is with focus on green economy recovery. So we all know that the COVID-19 had a great impact in our way of life, of course, in economic, in business, a lot of business shutting down. So but also, how do we take advantage of this situation when we are talking with going back to normal? How to take this opportunity to going back in normal, but not at all normal. So what I'm putting this here is what we would like to be in a decarbonization scenario. We are growing in terms of economic, but our carbon emissions are not in that way. How do we accomplish that? Through two approaches: new green investment for business opportunities, for business development, and new business models to become more sustainable. And the second one is what are we talking when we are talking about business models is maybe a lot of business, for example, had a way to work, a way to do technology, but the same business, not talking about new business, but this same business could reach some new ways to work. So why do we need private sector? Of course, the obvious answer is we need private sector to increase the investment in decarbonization. That's the obvious. But we also need it for example, market innovation. If we are talking of new technologies, new ways of work, we need to work very closely with private sector. For example, also in pilot projects that will give us the tools of which models are, for example, profitable, replicable, and which could contribute to green economic recovery. Also, of course, the private sector will give the markets new signs in which way should we go, like in a green way, for example, if we really want that. So with a focus on green recovery, we identify 3 sectors: finance in general, climate finance, climate change finance, transport, and energy. With the 3 sectors, we identify also 3 kinds of measures: for carbon pricing, for telecommuting, and for renewable energies. Which investment opportunities we identify to these measures? We found first a new model for develop a facility for carbon credit projects. Also, in the sector of renewable energies, we found, or we are making analysis of, for example, how microgrids could work for certain municipalities or isolated areas through solar energy. Also, a model for green hydrogen forklifts and solar panels for isolated areas. Finally, we also are making an analysis, and this is what I'm going to present later, investment opportunities for co-working spaces as a response to the telecommuting measure. So, co-working spaces. Why did we find that co-working spaces could be an investment opportunities, and how is this responding to a green recovery? So we all know that with the pandemic there was a lockdown, and with the lockdown a lot of business went from physical places to work to working at home. What of course this brought us a lot of issues to find, but also had one main benefit. It was less use of transportation from work to home. And of course, everyone that is on climate change space knows that less transportation means reduction of carbon emissions. Making some numbers, we found that, for example, if telecommuting were applied 3 days a week, it will help to reduce 1,000 million tons of CO2. And that is a lot. So I talked early of what challenges are for telecommuting. What is happening now, and also a lot of us could talk about this, is that telecommuting had these barriers like lack of digitalization, difficulty for creating a sense of belonging at work, lack of knowledge to organize inside all the company, and of course possible damage to mental health. So I'm also an example from how difficult could be to adapt to these new ways of work. So what is the threat? The threat is that today a lot of business are going from virtual again to a physical office. This means more transport, more emissions. How can we help to maintain, for example, a virtual or a hybrid way of work? So the solution could be, or one of the solutions could be, co-working spaces. Co-working spaces could improve the working conditions of all the personnel of the companies. This gives a new way to have sustainable business for one side, and also had the benefits, of course, of shared work with the colleagues, new and more efficient ways to organize for the company, a healthy and comfortable space to work, because we know that is very difficult. I said it before, it's very difficult to put a line, between what do we need to do at home and what do we need to do at work. And of course, this could be also less cost for a business to so they don't have to rent a space or pay for a space physically, permanently. So today, if we see how co-working spaces are working, there are 59 co-working buildings already in Lima. This covers at least 12,000 employees, with an average monthly fee of $200. And we have a potential demand of 80,000 employees only in Lima. So we see here some space to grow, some space to invest in this kind of opportunity of model. So what are we proposing? The creation of co-working spaces in Lima. We are assuming that companies will pay for their employees, not the employees paying their own memberships. Some of the costs we have, we include in our analysis are rent, electricity, water, internet, the space allocation. In case of buying some space for this co-working to work, the purchase of the property, chair, desk, coffee maker, water dispenser, etc. We analyze 3 different types of model, depending on the size, on the capacity, small, medium, and large. And what we found, and I have to say the numbers are really amazing, and we have made this analysis several times to be very sure of the numbers. We found the profit between 7% in the case of small size with purchase, with buying the property, or even 600% of profit if we rent the space and we put with large capacity. We put the business with large capacity.
Natalie, we have 1 more minute.
Okay, so this could save for every person 96 hours annually. And we are talking, of course, about, as I said before, a lot of carbon emissions reduced. So some key insights, really, here are some general key insights. The communication of, obviously, with stakeholders is important for the identification and development of investment opportunities. We found that some stakeholders for the investment opportunities are interested, but they obviously need evidence. They need the numbers, how profitable, in how many years are they are going to have their investment returns. Clear market signs, increased decarbonization investment. When we were searching with financial mechanism, there's still a lack of green sustainable financial mechanism in Peru. And of course, the development of every policy from the public sector should be aligned to promote the reduction of GHG emissions, especially with co-working spaces, we found we had recently a telecommuting law, but it could put in danger, for example, instead of promoting this measure of telecommuting. Well, that is, we need to adapt to that. The main idea I want to put here is that private sector is already developing investment ideas that could contribute with decarbonization. For example, these co-working spaces is something that maybe before the pandemic was happening a little, but with the pandemic, with everything that happened, now is a great opportunity to, more than ever, is a great opportunity that, to reduce our carbon emissions. So that's everything. Thank you, Rocio.
That's a lot, Natalie. More than. So thank you, and Natalie, maybe you can stop sharing now. So this would be the time to thank everyone. These were wonderful presentation, and you all kept the time limits also. Thank you very much for that. So I can open now. Well, the Q&A chat was always open, so this is the time for you to post your question to all the panelists. Otherwise, I would like to raise a couple of questions to the panelists to continue a little bit with the discussion. So maybe we can start with Luciano. And I would like to know if there are, based on what you have found or the research that you have been carrying on with the Fundación Torcuato de Itela, are there any immediate climate-related investment opportunities in Argentina? And what is happening right now in this market? So maybe I can make a couple of questions to make it a little bit more fluid. I would also like to know if there is a long-term political support for this type of investment in Argentina, which we know from the region that is not usually the case.
Thank you, Rocio. Two thoughts on this. First, as I mentioned earlier during our presentation, we are seeing some effervescence on, particularly in the renewable energy markets. We are seeing that lots of mostly multinational companies which have a C in Argentina, one participation in Argentina mostly, which have corporate targets for renewables, and apart from that are currently facing some liquidity issues in Argentina, which, as you might know, some companies are not able to transfer foreign exchange to their home countries. We see a lot of investment in term markets, which is called MATER in Argentina, for the development of power generation projects, large-scale power generation projects, to be contracted by private PPAs in 5 to 10 years at, let's say, around $60 per megawatt. That's happening right now, and we see it happening in the next months, and mostly at most 2 years perhaps. We have also seen an increasing interest for distributed power generation. Distributed power generation is growing steadily. It's currently still in the lower end of the scale, but we expect it to grow in the short term. And due to the shock of natural gas prices mostly, and their impact in power generation, we are seeing increasing interest also in efficiency. Efficiency supported by national development banks and other instruments. So these are the three. Regarding support, see, Argentina is difficult regarding long-term policy. We found a lot of volatility among different governments on several strategic aspects. However, particularly for biofuels and for renewables, and also for shale gas, let's say that happens. We have seen long-term support among different administrations being coherent in how they are trying to drive this forward. So support is there, and the private sector is calling from that, and it's interested in that. So we see it coming for the short and medium terms also.
Thank you, Luciano. I would dare saying that volatility is a feature from all the region, at least for the 3 countries that we have presented here. But it is good to have a little bit of hope that in the short term we see some support, and I do have the impression that in the last years we see more people, at least at the governmental level, discussing on these topics. So Carolina, maybe I can go to you, and this will apply to everyone, and I think that many of the presenters here will be able to have some inputs on this. But I would like to know, in particular for the AFOLU sector in Brazil, what are the enabling conditions for restoring the native forests, for example, which is one of the investment opportunities that you have presented at the end. And also in line with this, I would like to know what are the Brazil's social, economic, and environmental benefits and risks that the process of reforestation would bring if you do it with commercial species rather than with endemic.
Okay, thank you for the questions. I would say that we have a vast area with land that could be reforested in Brazil, particularly in the Amazon. We have around 90 million hectares of public land that are still undesignated. They're not indigenous land or conservation units, so they are just sitting there waiting for some investment to be made in reforestation. So expanding reforestation in these areas is very important, and it's very complex, given the high rates of conflict over property rights, rural violence, and land grabbing. So it's a challenging mitigation measure, not only to the risk, but also for the costs. And it can be achieved, it can become feasible with government support. Boosting, for example, the forest concession process through an amendment to the public forest management law. We propose, not only we, but our stakeholders and the Brazilians in general that are used to these issues, we propose an extension of the permit activities. For example, the legislation prohibits the sale of carbon credits in forest concessions. So we need to change the rules so it could make it feasible and from the economic point of view. And we need to improve the bidding procedure and adjustments to contractual regime. We need to broadening the financing schemes for sustainable forest use, as in the payment for environmental systems, and fostering restoration models that result in direct and short-term financial benefits for producers, such as bioeconomy and crop livestock forest integration systems. And so we need to adjust credit policies, attracting support from international funds and incentivizing forest offsets. In respect to your second question, regarding Brazil's socioeconomic environmental benefits and risks of reforestation with commercial species. In Brazil, we have some species that are very fast growing ones. So they are able to replace non-renewable biomass. It can be a carbon sink and protect biodiversity, since it prevents people from deforesting and natural forests, protect soils and water conservation, and generates direct jobs and income. You know, if well managed, this type of forest can help maintain hydrological processes, such as water infiltration in the soil and water quality. So the key point is good management, and we have a tradition on that. We have a vast area with very well good managed forests. And I think that it would not only help us, but if we can export pellets and that can help other countries to meet their own targets, it would be a great opportunity. Okay, thank you so much. Hope I could answer your questions.
Thank you, Carolina. That was quite comprehensive. And I think that in many cases, at least for the case in Peru, we can relate very closely to most of the points that you have done in terms of risks and co-benefits, for example, and in terms of which are the opportunities. In Peru, we also struggle with restoration, which is not being easy, not even in a more technical point of view on how to do it and how to implement it. But Peru is trying to incorporate this, for example, in the NDC, and as part of a bigger RED+ approach. So now, Natalie, I can switch to you if you are ready. So a couple of questions also. It would be interested to know, I mean, this is a really different approach from what we have seen from Argentina and Brazil, but still really focused. But so I would like to hear a little bit about the main challenges and barriers that Peru would face to leverage some investment opportunities in the country. And in terms of the co-working spaces, what are they necessary? What are the alternatives that companies or individuals can have instead of this?
Thank you, Rocio. So first, talking about how to leverage investment opportunities. So it's kind of difficult, actually. First, we have three main issues, I think. The first one is many of the opportunities we are analyzing, for example, they are not so known. I mean, they could be profitable, they could be replicable, but they are very, I mean, just a few number of this business going on, you know, like the investment, like the investors, not necessarily known how profitable could be this business. So, for example, I don't know, talking about solar panels, they could be profitable for a lot of business, for a lot of regions, even here in Peru, but they are not so known from everyone. There is no knowledge about how difficult can be the technology. By the way, it isn't very difficult. How are maybe the financial options? So this is a first main barrier. The other one goes to the other side for the developers of projects. Many times also a little bit, it's not that there is not a financial opportunity, but the projects haven't done their homework, or they don't manage to develop an integrated, very structured model of how they are working. So this is also very hard to finance. And another main barrier could be already for some sectors, the financial mechanism available for them, or available and none for everyone, because something we found also is that there is some financial mechanism, for example, renewable energies, but they don't have, I don't know, they don't have so much marketing. They are not very known from everyone, or obviously for the investors. That question, the other one, I think it was about the co-workings, if they are a necessity, or what are the alternatives. Yeah, I mean, we could say that it's best maybe if everyone stay at home, for example. No, there is no transport there. Even if I put some co-working spaces, people will have to make a little journey from their home to the co-working spaces, because it's not going to be at I mean, at 1 meter of my house, and this is going definitely have an impact in carbon emissions. But as I said in my presentation, there is a need to find a between point, a media point between physical work with the organization and the benefits that brings, and the telecommuting measures. You know, there has to be some benefits. There is some opportunities for the employees to make an equilibrium, to make to give an equilibrium between the life at home, the responsibilities at home, and the responsibilities at work, the time that we share with our families and the time we share at work. This is a very hard limit that make obvious in the pandemic, and now we need to know, and we need to find some equilibrium point that will make us, doesn't force us to go into a physical work with more transportation and more carbon emissions.
Thank you, Natalie. I receive an internal question also that would be interested. I think it is not only applicable to Carolina, but also to Natalie. I can make it a bit broader in terms of how is the elections debate at the national level in Brazil, but also at the subnational level in Peru. How are these discussions incorporating climate change in particular, or in the case of Brazil, AFOLU sector, or and in the case of Natalie, I mean the green recovery in general? Maybe we start with Carolina and then we switch to Natalie.
Climate change has been a very important issue in Brazil for a long time, you know, and the environmental issue as a whole is also important here, because we have a vast area with natural resources, and then with forests and other types of ecosystems. So it's been very important here. And as we have been facing an increase in deforestation rates since 2012, and that increased even more in the last years. It became a very important issue. So it's been debated everywhere, and every candidates are trying to make their points about it. And I see that the current government is facing a hard time because of these deforestation rates that increased recently. And I hope that we can, in the near future, have another picture to present to the world regarding the deforestation, because especially the Amazon region is a spotlight in the whole community, world community. Everybody pays attention to what's happening to the Amazon, and let's see what comes next. You know, if the current government gets reelected, if it can change, or it can change what is going on nowadays. But the polls here are saying that we will have another government. So let's see what they come up with to curb deforestation as it's required for the country to meet the NDC target. That's my view.
Thank you. Let's wait for October the 2nd, right?
Yes.
The first results of this campaign. Also in October the 2nd, we have the subnational elections in Peru. So that is a key date for our region and for the Amazon in particular. So maybe Natalie, you can jump in and complement what Carolina has said.
Yeah, as you said, we have subnational elections here. Actually, there hasn't been a lot of focus on climate change in the subnational elections. But of course, here in Peru, the political issues have a deep effect on the climate change planification. I don't know if many of you know, but here in Peru, we are going through a very unstable context in the political issue. That means a lot of sectors, including climate change, including environmental, for example, ministry, are changing of leadership, like with 1 month or 2 months in difference. This, of course, have an impact if you want to plan for many years in the future. But thankfully, a lot of the technical levels here in Peru are at least, I mean, they are not changing so fast as the leadership. So we could go through a lot of new. I don't have the English word for it, but we're working ahead with the climate change agenda. But of course, I mean, we should have more focus on climate change also in these elections. Talking, for example, about forestry. Here we have a lot of issues in the Amazonas region. With deforestation, for example, there is a lot of work that needs to be done with legal actions like mining or deforestation that are going on, and we really need a strong leadership for that.
Perfect, thank you. Luciano, maybe you can also jump in. I know you mentioned that some of the barriers are in the political agenda. I don't know, I don't think you have elections soon, maybe next year, right? But I don't know how strong this be in the political agenda in general or in the campaigns.
I couldn't turn on my microphone. I'm sorry. Thank you, Rocio. See, the climate change issues are increasingly appearing in discussions, mostly in those driven by civil society. Honestly, they haven't yet been a campaign issue for the previous years. They think, and maybe that's an issue by itself, right? Since some of the fiscal and balance of payment urgencies for Argentina are introducing a short-termism in policy and political discussion. So it hasn't been introduced as a key issue for the political debate right now. And honestly, I don't think that it will, at least for the next elections. I don't see it right now.
Yeah, I think this is a common ground for all the messages that we've gotten a little bit, with the exception of Brazil, that is right. I mean, the Amazon is in the eye of the international community, but still, right, a lot of more putting it in a higher level could work a little bit, just to bring the topic up in the political agenda. So I have one more question for Natalie. We are running now out of time, but Natalie, what are the best political stakeholders to approach under this context to push this climate agenda? And I think that this can be answered actually by everyone. This is valid for all countries as well.
Yeah, when talking about political agenda, about climate change, I think the best ally here, not talking about the politics themselves, is private sector. I mean, private sector can push the agenda of climate change, and I think it's already doing it by showing examples of how climate change can be an answer and the question to make new sustainable models, and also making there are some technical groups, technical spaces to talk with the political actors, also to put on the table, to put in the agenda what is necessary, what are the enable conditions to make some regulatory changes, for example, for these investment opportunities to work more efficiently.
Thank you, Natalie. Very good answer. Maybe Luciano or Carolina, would you also like to jump in and complement?
Carolina,
I just want to rephrase my answer, because I heard, what about deforestation as an issue in the national election? And I can read it here. It's about, the question was about reforestation. So I'm sorry for answering the wrong question. And I would say that deforestation is an issue in the campaigns here, as I already mentioned, but reforestation is an issue much more linked to the business and people that want to put it ahead, because it's really something that can make a difference in the market, in the carbon market, in business and things like that. So, and the National Bank, the National Development Bank, is studying how to increase it now, how to provide financial resources, what is required to to boost this sector in the country. So it's an issue, but it's not as political as is deforestation. So it's just a remark to make my answer more precise, more accordingly to the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina.
May I jump in? Just one more comment. I completely concur with Natalie. The private sector, in some sense, is driving the climate discussion. Perhaps we can say, despite, in some cases, the lack of policy or of long-term signals from some governments. I think that the issues related to competitiveness in this new climate action-driven world and this awareness on the climate crisis is driving the public sector interest in decarbonizing their operations. In some cases, they express that, of course, they're doing it for the money, and that's fine. They are doing it because they know that this new world claims for climate competitiveness. So this decarbonization of operations, both with renewables in the power sector, with biofuels, with efficiency, is something that we are already seeing and that we might expect to see even further during the following months and years. So Natalie, I completely agree. The private and mostly the corporate sector is doing a lot on this, but also the young generations, right? They are pushing for an agenda which has not yet come into the political debate for elections, for example, but they own the future. So they pushing for this agenda is certainly going to be transformational also.
I totally agree with both Natalie and Luciano.
Thank you, Carolina. And I think that with this positive in agreement tone, we can close this session. I want to thank you all for helping us to carry this out and having it perfect. And then to all participants also for joining this call when there is so many options in the New York Climate Week. So thank you for participating. And I posted, please remember, all the information about our website and Decarbonizar in the chat, so you can also access the information there. So thank you, everyone, and have a nice afternoon.